Thank you very much for coming to the second Design Systems Coalition meetup ever. First one is 2017. I won't keep you long. We'll get to the talks really soon. I just wanted to talk about a couple of things. First of all, thank you so much to Etsy for offering to host this event. Yep. They've been super helpful and supplied lots of delicious food and drinks and things like that. So and it's a great space to have an event like this in. Secondly, I also wanted to let you know we now have an official website, so we're proper now. And so the reason I put a website together is because we'll be posting videos from events, and we're also going to be starting a interview series with speakers that speak at the meetups. And to put a different twist on it, so we're not repeating the meetup, we'll be asking them about you know, what things inspire them, what motivates them, what some of their biggest challenges have been to working on design systems. So keep an eye out for that. They'll be posted, linked to the site and posted on Medium. And also, yeah, thanks to Etsy tonight, they'll be recording this meetup, so you can relive the memories by the video, and also photos, and yeah, just to remember what a great time it was. I guess I just wanted to quickly cover like what the format of tonight is. How many people is this their like first time coming to this meetup? Wow, nice. Lots of new people. That's awesome. Okay, so the format is to have 3 10-minute lightning talks on the same topic, so that we can have like a really niche-focused meetup. And then what we'll have afterwards is discussion time. So you'll be able to ask all the speakers questions together. I'll try and help moderate that, but try and, you know, if there's someone specifically you want to hear from, then we'll do that. And so without further ado, the first speaker that we're having tonight is my colleague and boss, so be nice, say it great, Sophie Shepherd. She's a design manager at GitHub, and she works on both the creative team, and she also like contributes to design systems. So we work quite closely together, and she's going to talk tonight about how we work with brand and scale that. So I will we'll do the laptop swap and we'll hand over to Sophie. Cool.
Don't judge me based on my desktop. All right. So as Diana said, I work on this kind of weird intersection between design systems and the web team. And the way we define the web team is we are responsible for all non-product web pages. So a lot of the time that's marketing sites. This is our github.com if you're logged out. So this is getting people to sign up for GitHub, explaining what our features are. We do all the websites for various documentation, for guides, you know, teaching people about GitHub. We do press releases and anything that lives on the web. We do annual reports. So this is like all the data from GitHub over the last year. We do the diversity report. We do a giving report, all sorts of stuff. GitHub puts on, I think this year it's going to be 5 different conferences. So we do all of the websites and work with the creative team on the identities for all of the conferences. This is another one. And then I also work on the design systems team. So On one hand, I am trying to be as creative as possible and have all of these subsites that need to kind of match but not always match. And then on the other hand, I am working with CSS and trying to keep things consistent and not add a ton of custom CSS and document how everything's working. So on a daily basis, this is me at any given time. On one hand, people are saying, like, expand this, go crazy, it doesn't need to look like GitHub, it's fine. And then on the other hand, I need to really keep things looking consistent, working well, documented, not a huge mess of CSS. And these are some of the challenges. And what we've found is that what we really need is a well-documented brand that can then spread out across all of these different properties. But that has not been easy. If you think of GitHub, you may think of the Octocat, who is a cat who is also an octopus, who dresses up as all of these crazy different things, and she's pretty fun. She has kind of a fun persona. Sometimes she's animated, and this is very much at odds with the product itself, which doesn't have any animations, nothing popping out at you, no weird hybrid animal people. And in many ways, and this is something that I think is valuable and important to the product, is that it gets out of your way and just lets you do your work and get what you need to do done. But when thinking about how we document our brand and how it should live on in other properties, there's always this push and pull of, like, should it be fun or should it just be very utilitarian? To make it even more complicated, a lot of the time when you're using GitHub, you're not even using the interface. So the touch points for our brand and our product oftentimes don't even have a custom UI. And so the first big challenge is figuring out how we can define a brand that doesn't necessarily have an interface, and that the act of using it is almost as important as the visual brand itself. But of course, that's very hard to put in a brand guide and into documentation. A second large challenge we have is, this is our pull request view, and the pull request is a very central part of GitHub as a product. And if anyone in here doesn't use GitHub, what that is it's you can make a suggestion to change something, be it big or small, and it results in a very collaborative, iterative environment. And this is great for open source projects, it's great for development, it's great for teams, and it's very not great for brand. This concept of always being able to change something, everyone having an equal say, an opportunity to jump in and edit something, this is a big part of our culture internally, which again I think is a great thing, but as a designer can really complicate stuff. So this is an example of a design element that we've been using recently. We call it code lines. And we've noticed that, or I've noticed that when we use it, it doesn't get documented for, like, specifically how it should look. And it slowly evolves, and it's pretty harmless. Like, this is another example. And also start to notice the way we're using icons around it. These are similar colors, but not exactly the same, and the styling is slightly different, the kind of cloud-like on the top, and then different here with different icons. Then we start using them as pieces of, like, bigger illustrations. And these all kind of match, and they kind of work together, but they're inconsistent. The way we're using icons is inconsistent, strokes are inconsistent, colors are inconsistent. And this isn't a big deal for our creative team, because oftentimes it's like just being added to a tweet or something. But for me on the web team, this becomes very noticeable, because I may have a website that has, you know, one from the top left and one from the bottom left, and it's not linear, so they're going to be together. And for me, consistency is very important. At the same time, iteration and this part of our culture and evolving a brand is also very important. So this is a constant push and pull also of how we can be changing things, not overly define what something should be, but at the same time make sure that we can encourage this culture of iteration and evolution without completely, you know, not having a specific brand. The third thing is that we have a very amazing creative and art team at GitHub. This is literally what they do. They have dream jobs, painting custom things. This on the left is a wrap that goes on a vending machine in our office. They make, for different conferences, animated movies that are amazing. It's like Disney quality. This is a bust of Dorothy Vaughan that they're doing for our office, and they're just sculpting it, and then they're going to make it into bronze. So, yeah. So obviously I work with extremely talented people, and the last thing I would want to do is go back to them, and they probably want this even less, to say, like, you can only use these colors, you can only use, you know, these fonts. I don't want to put limits on them. At the same time, it is very important that we don't have this brand that's just all over the place. So this is the last big challenge, is how can we put limitations and keep things consistent while also allowing ourselves to break out from that at times. So I don't know the answer. But I've started to think about this, and thinking specifically about the first point, where GitHub is an experience as much as it is a brand, and thinking about that experience as a spectrum, and that different users, depending on when they're coming in to use the product, need different things. So on this spectrum, we have, on the very left, someone with no context. They have no idea what GitHub is. And on the right, someone who has used it, knows what it's like, what it does, and they're very familiar with it. And these people have very different needs from the brand. And the people on the right have a lot of context. So it's less important to them that something looks consistent. They know what GitHub is. They know how we talk about things. They know what they can do with it. They probably know about our octocats. They don't need, you know, if something doesn't look the same, it's not going to bother them because so much of their experience has not looked the same. So when thinking about this spectrum, the people on the left, there's less flexibility of how we can treat the brand there. But if you have all of this experience and context, then things can start branching out and get a little different. So when thinking about this practically and how we use it internally, I have started to think about the people who are using GitHub. So at the very left, it's someone who's never even heard of it, has no idea what it does, no associations whatsoever. People who have heard of it, people who have used it, so they may have opened a pull request or worked on issues or something, but they're not a regular user. There are people who need it, so people who use it daily at work. And then there's the super fans and employees. So these are folks who are very, very used to it and really understand what it does. And if we start to think about documenting our brand in this way, then we can, and again, on the left, there's less flexibility with the brand, and on the right, there's a lot more. We can start to define it in this way. And what I like about this in my systems kind of front-end developer brain, this matches really well to the way we structure our CSS and the different packages that we are using. So we have a core set of CSS that's used across all of our properties, which you know, are things like spacing scales and a very pared down color system. And it's really important that we stick to those for the people who have never heard of GitHub before, and that we don't branch out too far. But as we get down on the spectrum, we can start adding more and more things. By the time you're at the end, you know, we can add basically whatever we want. And when thinking about specific web properties that fall into this, the marketing site, we can say this is targeted at people who do not have an account. So they may or may not have heard of GitHub. They probably don't use it. So it needs to fit into this part of the spectrum and therefore have these rules. It needs to have the core styles. We can't add a ton new fonts. It needs to have the core illustration styles. I'm thinking of other sites. We have a training website. So those are people who probably have an account, at least have heard of GitHub. They might need it for work. They might use it regularly and they just want to level up their skills. This falls somewhere here on the spectrum, something like a conference. These are people who are, they love GitHub so much that they're going to go to a conference about it. So it's less important that that looks, you know, that we're not introducing them to GitHub, so we can go a little crazy there. Our shop, if you're buying a GitHub hoodie, you probably have heard of it. And then all the way on the end, things like busts of heads for, that doesn't need to follow any kind of brand guidelines because it's purely for the employees or people coming to our office. You're probably already loving GitHub at that point. So thinking of our brand documentation and guidelines and limitations in this way helps, if we think of it as an experience first, which is one of the challenges we had, but can also be flipped into thinking about how we start to define these things. It considers that. It allows for iteration. It allows for easier iteration further down the funnel you get. But even in the core, it kind of defines that iteration. So if we're changing one of the core elements, we know what that's going to affect. And then same thing for creativity. We just are able, using this spectrum, to know where the creativity should happen. So we can test things for our users who are already sold, and potentially that can go back down to the newer people. But that's not necessarily the place that we should be trying new things and going crazy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Will Miner from 2U, and I guess you'll explain what 2U does. So I'll leave it up to you. You'll do a better job than I will.
That is the first 5 slides of my presentation, and it's basically the first 5 slides of any 2U presentation that you end up getting. So get excited. Yeah, that's what I was doing. Work today. My cursor. There. All right. So, hello everybody. My name is Will Miner. I am the Director of User Experience at a company called 2U. And just to give you a little bit of background on myself, to kind of give context to why I'm here. So I obviously run the UX team there, but in a past life I was actually a UX developer at 2U. And then before that I worked at Intel as a human factors engineer. So I kind of have like this weird, well, it's not weird anymore, but like design and development background that I sort of leverage day to day. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about basically how we build our design system to handle branding at scale. And you'll understand kind of what scale means in the 2U sense in a second. So for those of you that don't know who 2U is, we are an education technology company. We're up in Chelsea. We were founded in 2008. And basically what we do is we partner with top-tier universities. So these are schools that you've typically heard of. And we help them bring their on-campus graduate degrees online. So sort of how that works out is you have a school like University of Southern California. And they come to 2U and they're like, hey, 2U, we have this really awesome on-campus social work program. And we want to figure out a way to deliver it online. And as 2U, we say, awesome. So here's how it's going to work. You guys, you're going to provide us your awesome, high-quality, tenured instructors. You guys are going to make all the admissions decisions, so you're going to decide who gets in, who doesn't get in. You guys are going to, provide the degrees because you're the university. And we're also going to use your branding on all the sites because at the end of the day, it's your students. They're going to your university, and they're getting your degrees, so it's your brand. So 2U sort of acts as a silent partner in all this. People don't necessarily know that we're the technology behind these programs. Then what 2U does is we help market the sites, so we help people find out about the program. We do support, so if you have technical problems or you just need counseling about getting your degree, you can call us at 2U. We help with production, so we help translate those on-campus materials into a digital format. And then most importantly to me and my team in this row right there, we do technology, so we build, the software that the programs are actually delivered on. We also maintain it, do all the DevOps stuff, basically things that universities could never in a million years dream of doing themselves. Okay, So how does branding work in this kind of situation? So it's really a 4-step process, and you have the university at the top of it. The university typically has a style guide that they have made for print. It has logos and guidance about how to use the logos. It has colors, guidance how to use the colors. If we're lucky, it's accessible. And what will happen is our brand team will work with the university to basically, take that style guide and make some decisions about, okay, we're going to use these 4 colors, and we're going to use these 2 logos, and, it's this whole back and forth between then the brand team and our creative team. So this is another team, and this team is made up of mostly graphic designers. It's them kind of figuring out, how the brand is going to be expressed, mostly on our marketing sites. And then finally, all the way at the end of the list, you have the tech team who sort of gets this handoff of like, these are the colors, make something happen with it. For the most part, we're not really consulted that much. And that's a little bit by design, but what you're probably noticing is like, why are there all these steps? And there's all these steps because if you think about what a university really is at the end of the day, it's professors and a brand. Why do people go to Yale, which is actually one of our partners? They go to Yale because, for a lot of reasons, it's Yale. It's brand. It's a $1 billion, 300-year-old brand. And if you think about from the university's perspective, they're giving this little startup, or they're a public company but in 2008, we were a little startup. They're giving this company founded in 2008, my 200-year-old, $1 billion brand to not basically mess up. So there's all these people that are like in charge of making sure that we don't mess up the brand. What happened here? Okay. I like jumped a bunch of weird slides. Weird. Anyways, yeah. So in 2014, when I started, this was what our landscape looked like. We had 6 different brands, so you can see that across the top, and we had 3 different products. And if I'm doing the math right, that's about 18 different permutations of the brand across different products. And already there was sort of this need for a design system because across each of those products we had 3 different designers, and those 3 different designers didn't always talk to each other, and they would always wind up with like different buttons that were slightly different and different fonts that were slightly different and different different forms and stuff. So we needed a design system to kind of keep us all together. So what we developed kind of as a proto, I don't want to really call it a real design system because it was sort of a proto design system, was this thing that we called Harmony. And Harmony was, a design system, but really more than anything, it was a CSS framework that, sort of codified what buttons looked like, what forms looked like, what the topography is like, also how that stuff is, designed in CSS so the developers don't have to rewrite it every time. And it, kept us honest on the design side of things and consistent, and also made it easy for the developers to actually go ahead and build this stuff to spec. How we used Harmony to do branding specifically, though, is pretty simple, less here. You just have a bunch of variables, and we would set colors. And this is actually a subset of a gigantic theme.less file that had every single, combination of theming and branding that we had for all of our products. Developers would install it through what was Bower at the time. This is like 2014. They would install it via Bower. And then in their product, in their less file, they would define the theme. So this is Georgetown University, Masters of Science in Nursing. And through that crazy pathing, they would import Harmony and use the color like so. That's what happens when you're like 7 folders deep and need your imports. So pretty simple, straightforward. Like anybody can think that up, how you do branding. But we kept going, and we kept adding program after program after program. And we started having all of these problems. First problem that we had is, where do assets go? GitHub is made for code. I don't think it was really made to be an image storage server. But after the 5th or 6th program, that's basically what it became for us. We were using it to store and serve images, which wasn't an awesome experience for anybody involved. So where do assets go? Next were different versions. So as a design team, we're constantly iterating, updating, improving our design system or Harmony, but the developers are like pinned to a version of it. And so what resulted in me basically prodding the dev teams like, hey, can you update your Harmony dependencies? We need all these new things, so everything was consistent. Of course, they didn't do it. So you had really kind of disjointed designs where you had one site had our old buttons, one site had our new buttons. It was kind of a mess. Next, We did the really dumb thing of asking our creative team, who are, again, graphic designers, to use Git to update all of our colors and assets. They were really bad at Git, and to this day continue to be bad at Git like 3 years later, and it just resulted in a lot of work for us. The universities asked for a lot more customizations. So as we added more programs, we're using basically the same template for each of our sites. So Berkeley, was like, hey, I don't want my site to look like Syracuse. So we had to come up with all these interesting ways to make things look differently from an aesthetic point of view. And they wanted fonts and different sized logos and different colors and all these different things that Harmony wasn't really pulling off well. And then finally, as anybody who has ever built a design system, you're only as good as your documentation site. And we were solving all those other problems, and of course the documentation site got out of sync, and developers got mad at us because we'd be like, oh, you're doing it wrong, but you're like, oh, it's in the documentation site. I'm like, no, the documentation's wrong. Anyways, it was a whole bad experience that resulted in, bad developer usability. So to bring it all together, in 2014 we were here. This is where we are today. So we had 6 programs. Now we have 38 programs. And we also have 8 products across mobile and the web. So how did we get to that with still kind of keeping our sanity and keeping the developers happy and most importantly, keeping our universities happy? So the first thing we did is we basically redid our design system. We created something that we call Uni. Uni is, you can actually go to the website if you want it, I can give it to you afterwards, but Uni is basically our new design system, and it stands for 3 things. First off, it stands for unified. So it's unifying our products on a consistent look and feel. Next, it's built for universities. So it's designed to incorporate university branding. And then finally, it sort of takes on the principles of universal design. If anybody's familiar with that, it's focused on accessibility and making sure it works for everybody, regardless of your physical constraints. There were 3 principles that sort of guided us as we were building Uni. The first one is be strict. So what does this mean for us? This means be really strict about colors, especially in the design system. So you can see on the right here, we have all these different requirements around color action has to hit a contrast ratio, has to be different from another color, should reuse another color, and also shouldn't be red or green because we're using that for status colors. So all these requirements around color and other things were really important to us. Also, one of the things that happens when you have 38 different programs is the designers on my team don't have the time to look at all 38 permutations of their design in each different color. So they sort of have to design sight unseen for a lot of our programs. So you really have to be able to trust that color action is always going to work with color accent. From the developers, though, we also developed validation for the usage of Harmony. So this is a mix-in that we wrote that basically validates for the tags given to it. So here you have a button class. And basically what it's going to check for is if the button class is placed on the button tag and anchor tag. And if you put it on a div, for instance, you get a really big red flashing error message to a developer that tells them, you did something wrong, go fix it. This keeps us out of a lot of accessibility issues because you really shouldn't be making buttons out of divs. Next, and sort of the opposite, is be flexible. So Uni has, I would guess, probably up to 500 different Sass variables right now. And it's a little bit extraneous because, as you can see on the right, we're not actually using all of them. But it gives us that flexibility when the university asks, hey, I want the H2 to be 64 pixels high, or 64 pixel font. And we're like, OK, we can pull it off. We'll figure it out. So it gives us that flexibility. Also, we use Sass functions a lot. So here, this is a color contrast function, and basically you give it a background color, and it spits out a text color that works with that background color. So we use it like so. So this is an alert danger. We only have to have that one danger variable, and you plug in the function, and it just makes sure that color attribute in CSS is either white or black, depending on what the background color is. And finally, and this is the thing that I love talking about the most because I built it, is a product called White Label. And White Label sort of complements Uni. So White Label is an Express app that we built. And basically what it does is for the creative team, it allows them to go in, and they can log in, and they just put in hex codes. They stop using Git completely. They change the variables, they can change the logos, and when they're done, they hit save. What happens then is a developer then plugs this URL into the head of their product, and as the creative team makes changes, they hit save, and it just goes everywhere. There's no deployments, there's no work from us, it just happens. So they can change the logos on the fly. We had a problem a couple years ago where USC wanted us to change the logo at 3 p.m. on a Thursday because they were announcing a name change of their program. We couldn't do that. With this, all the creative team has to do is hit save, and they're done. So that's a lot. It's like a very lightning-ish talk, but that's it. That's how we do it today. Like, this is, I think, sort of cutting edge from us, and it's not on every product so far, but we're rolling it out, and so far it's been really successful. And maybe I'll come back and talk when we're at 90 programs and we do something completely different, but that's how we keep our head afloat today. Thanks.
Thank you, Will. That was awesome. Definitely could relate to some of your experiences there. And I have my notes with me this time so I can do a proper intro. So our next speaker is Marco, and he is a staff product designer at Etsy and works to support the products with design systems and can probably, again, explain that better. So welcome, Marco.
I don't know about you all, but I've had about 3 glasses of wine, so feeling pretty good. We're gonna have some fun. All right, let's see if this all works. Where's my mouse? No. No, it's my presenter notes. Oh, yeah. Is that the right one? Okay. It's ridiculous. Okay, so I'm Marco. I work on design systems here. I'm extremely excited to talk to you all about how we scale our pattern library to be able to support different products and different brand expressions here at Etsy. So since the beginning of time, we've all worked to support the Etsy brand, both for buyers and sellers, our marketplace, and the seller tools. And we have done this for the past few years by using our toolkits. We have toolkits for web, for iOS, for Android, and for email. And this is a little snapshot of some components from our web toolkit. And they're just like, it's just like any other pattern library that you're familiar with. This is a collection of components to build interfaces, and the process for building this has been a very simple linear system. So at the very top, we start with our what we call atoms. It's kind of co-opted that word from atomic design, but it's the most like elemental parts of our brand and our UI. So it's things like our color palette, our typefaces, our grid, any other value that we use over and over again for different parts of our UI. And then we pass that through SAS variables into our web toolkit and then into our interface. But all that changed whenever we decided to launch a new marketplace. So launching later this year is Etsy Studio. And Etsy Studio is a marketplace where you can go for everything DIY. And it's where shoppers and makers can find inspiration and supplies from a global community of sellers. And Etsy Studio is a neighborhood within the city of Etsy. It's a sibling to the Etsy marketplace. And it expresses itself as a separate marketplace by not only through the overall experience considerations, but also in the aesthetic of its UI. You can see that it looks slightly different than the Etsy marketplace. And also later this year, we're launching an update to our seller tools. So Shop Manager It's now called treats our seller tools as software, which is very different from a marketplace. And both Shop Manager and Etsy Studio have unique design needs that create divergences within our toolkits, primarily our web toolkit. So how do we fix this? How do we solve this? The first thing is just this by doing CSS overrides. And this is very similar to everyone going out for one more drink at the end of the night, where it sounds really good in the moment, but then you hate yourself the next day. So, but this is honestly, this is the reality of things. We all have timelines, we all have launch dates, and we just got to get things done. And we are very guilty of overriding our overrides even. So the next way to potentially solve this problem is by duplicating everything. So duplicating our atoms, duplicating our toolkits, so that we can have what we need to do to build our interfaces. Problem is, this is a scalability issue. The design systems team is still relatively small, and we can't duplicate our workload with every new product or every new brand expression that we create. Also, is just a technical, duplicating our web toolkit just sounds like insanity. And so the question is, how do we support multiple products with different design and brand considerations without increasing design and technical overhead? That's the problem, that's the thing to fix. So Katie Sauer-Miller, our engineer on design systems, came up with this idea of using design tokens. And if you're unfamiliar with design tokens, it is a layer of abstraction that you put on the values of your CSS properties. So this is a little bit of CSS to render this button. And if you look at the background color, F56400, it's a hex code. That's a pretty concrete thing. What design tokens do is it abstracts it to button primary background color. And the interesting thing about design tokens is different than other variables, how it describes how the value is used, or the purpose of the value, as opposed to describing what it is. So we have variables for things for our colors, and we use words very Etsy words like blinding sandstorm and one-year-old Gouda as our literal variable names. But this is the cool thing about this is how it describes the purpose as opposed to what it is. And what it does is allows us to, depending on which where the token maps to, we can switch out the values of our CSS properties. So going back to our linear process here, we insert this layer of abstraction between our toolkit and our atoms, and we wind up with something that looks like this. So our web toolkit has not changed. We're just managing this one code base. But then depending on which tokens we're loading and what atoms that maps to, we can render a very different looking UI. It's a pretty cool concept. It's been really powerful. And then it gets even crazier whenever we add in other platforms. So like I mentioned before, we have toolkits for Android and for iOS, and those are still very much in the beginnings of being created and implemented, but the concept remains the same. And there's a bunch of lines in the middle, but the cool thing is at the very top, there's one set of atoms for the entire brand and all of its apps. So say in 2 or 3 years we get tired of orange and we want to switch to fuchsia or something like that, then all we have to do is change the hex code in one place, and it renders a change in all of our apps just magically. So it's a really powerful concept. But the thing is, and this is still very, very, very much in progress. For anyone here at Etsy, there's that sounds cool. This is very, very much in progress. Like I mentioned, iOS and Android is still the foundation is being laid. For web, we have implemented a lot of tokens for the Etsy marketplace, and we're working with the Etsy Studio team and the Shop Manager team to start rolling those changes out too. But the thing is, to me, there's an even bigger learning in all this. If we go back to the problem statement, how do we support multiple products with different design and brand considerations without increasing our design technical overhead? The design token solves the technical part, but there's still the design problem. Design tokens are powerful because they decouple style and purpose, right? Style is very specific and concrete, whereas purpose is abstract. it's much easier to scale the abstract than the concrete. And the abstract is where you can create solutions that work for multiple problems. And like as we as design systems people, like that's our goal, to solve many problems with like as few solutions as possible. And so when this light bulb went off for me, this whole like concept of decoupling style and purpose is kind of like this moment. And the funny thing is when you see this beam or this GIF at this scale, you notice, I think it's Sigmund Freud who was like consoling Ted in the background. Like watch his hand right there. So when I looked at some of our past projects, I had to realize like we were already doing this without realizing it. So for instance, about a year ago, I worked on a project where I was a company, we were updating our color palette for our UI. And so I was working on like how we can interpret our new color palette in the UI and make it work and not, you know, crash all of our metrics. And I looked at our the flow from like registration through buying an item all the way through to like the post-purchase screen. And if you notice, there's a ton of colors here. You go from a white button with orange text to a green button with white text to a green outline with green text, back to the green button, into a white button with blue text, to an orange button, to a green, to blue. So I was like, okay, what happens if we just make everything the same? And you start to create like continuity. You create consistency. This is a flow. And previously, the reason why there were these colors is because we were attributing purpose to the style. Like green we use to mean money. So anything that was related to like adding to cart, to a transaction, had this concept of money. But outside the United States, money isn't green. And so the making this all the same changed the way we view the colors. Colors were now, for actions, they were primary actions and they were secondary actions. Primary action moves you through a flow. Secondary action moves you laterally or removes you through the flow. And that was like the purpose of our colors in actions. And so when we worked on our color palette, like text colors and background colors had already pretty much been set. We had this like beautiful color palette for marketing things, like Old Rose and Almond and Blinding Sandstorm and One-Year-Old Gouda and stuff. But the primary and secondary actions was like the really cool thing. And so when we looked at, when I worked on the colors for like primary and secondary actions, and then now in this world where we're supporting these multiple brand expressions, the concept, the purpose of color remains the same while the style can change. And this is the colors and the button styles for Etsy Studio. So again, going back to this concept, like we have our toolkits and like toolkits, pattern libraries, whatever we call them. Like I think we're all talking about the same thing here. Is a very concrete concept. Like they're it's code. But then on top of this is this abstract layer of purpose, which we call our guidelines. And that's an abstract concept. And we're in the process of building this into, putting all of this into, and a bunch of other stuff, into a website that we're calling the Design Guide. And the Design Guide is a website and a resource where any designer, engineer at Etsy can get all the information they need to build anything for Etsy's properties. This is all still very in the works as well. The design systems team at Etsy is in the process of building the site and doing all kinds of other stuff. But my question to y'all is, can you define the purpose of your design decisions? So I really believe that building toolkits to be able to support an infinite number of brand expressions and products is not just a technical problem, it's a design problem. It's a fundamental design problem. Alignment and definition of the purpose of our design decisions is what makes scalability possible. So that's it. If you have any questions about this or completely disagree, this is my Twitter handle and my email. So thank you all very much for listening.
And actually, if you have questions, you can ask them right now or when we get the the stools on stage, because we're going to have some panel discussion now, or open questions. I'll just wait for people to get the chairs. So yeah, Sophie and Will, if you want to come up. We'll have, because this is being recorded, if you can either use the mic in the middle, or there'll be a couple of roving mics, just to make sure that that gets on the recording, that'd be great. Oh no, we made you carry your own chips. Sit to the, maybe sit together. There's a, yeah, if that's okay.
Hi. Oh, it's working. Cool. I have so many questions. It's going to be really hard, but I'm just going to... Do you guys mind if I ask more than one? Okay. So... Oh, crap. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I have a lot. Oh, my first question is for Will. So white label, it sounds real magical. And I guess my question is, what are the downfalls to it? Because I mean, it sounds so great. I mean, there's got to be a dark side.
The downfall. Is this on? Yeah. Cool, Matt. I don't know. I'll answer, but yeah, me and Matt work very closely on white label. So the downfalls of white label are it introduces a ton of risk to the UX team. So now I am responsible for building a product that supports every single product that 2U owns. So if white label goes down, all of our sites stop having styles. So luckily it's behind CloudFront. It has like a ton of redundancy and like some safety message and like a bajillion tests. But it's still like, I think for the first month that we had it, like I was like not getting great sleep because I was worried it was going to go down or we were going to push something, it was going to break everything. So that's definitely one of the big downsides. Is it makes it risky.
Okay, I'm still by myself, so I can ask more questions. So with, I guess I was thinking about font systems and responsive design and thinking about scaling those things. So your designers, do they refer to white label when they're making their designs, or do they start with something and then refer to white label to pull in information from it? Because if you, as a designer, are they happy with the idea that everything is already pieced together for them, as in they don't really have creative freedom? Like, how does that work?
So white label is like, so our design system is called Uni.
Oh, sorry.
And that has all of the buttons and like forms and stuff. White label is just like the delivery method.
Okay.
It's like how people customize Uni.
Okay. Thank you. But I mean, for the design, for Uni, is that an issue? Because you work with so many different products, and let's say University of California is like, hey, we want something completely fresh and new. Someone in your team is probably working on the designs for that, I would think. So I guess in terms of creative freedom, are they happy with it? Like, how do you balance creative freedom?
Right there.
I think every one of us would get a different answer to that question.
Yeah.
Different things that we work with.
Okay, use blanks.
My general, no, don't answer. I'm going to answer for you. To average their responses, or I think their impressions of it, I think I think that's, you give up a little bit of your creativity by working just not for yourself.
Yeah,
so you have to, you work for 2U, you're designing for the university, so like it's an agreement that we all use the same buttons. Like that's part of the deal.
Okay.
But also, I think we sort of talk about Uni as the base code. So yes, there are some decisions made for you, but after that, layout, how the buttons are arranged, really the UX of the product, that's really up for the designers to, up for them to decide.
Okay, let's let some other people ask some questions, and then if there's not many, you can come up again. But thanks, they're great questions.
Hi there. My question is, I guess, two-pronged. One is, how do you guys introduce new elements and components into a design system? And then how do you actually integrate that into in this case, it would be white label. And how do you integrate that new thing into the overall living, breathing component library, whatever Brad Frost calls it, whatever, onto like the actual product and site online or on your phone or whatever?
Is that for all the speakers, or?
Yeah, whoever wants to, yeah.
Okay, do you want to pass the mic? Take turns.
I think we're in a probably not a very unique situation, but in the situation of less so introducing new things and more paring down existing things. And I think to get to that point of deciding what the one survivor should be within multiple styles requires a lot of discussion and testing. And then once we do make that decision, oftentimes Diana will write a team post to let the wider company know, make sure it's documented, and then hope and pray that people use it.
This is a very relevant question for us. We're in the process of developing like a true process for how new things are added to our toolkits. Usually it starts with a need, like someone's working on something and they realize like the conventions of our web toolkit isn't working, and so instead of just like configuring it and doing something custom, the idea is like, okay, I'm going to design something that's going to work for everyone, and then we'll add it to the system. So the idea is like all design becomes systems design. And so it starts with the need, and then there's this piece of like that I mentioned, like what is the purpose of this? Like what are we accomplishing? Not for this one particular project or feature, but like what is this solving at a higher level? And then usually there's a few rounds of iterations with that, both in the design front and how it's built, you know, going through accessibility requirements and all that kind of stuff. And then it ends in a pull request where design systems looks through it, makes any comments for things that could be written better, and it's pulled in. As far as the adoption of it goes, part of that process is adding it to our toolkit docs. And then there's not a very formal way, but right now it's just socialized through email or Basecamp or whatever tools we're using.
I mean, exactly what they said. I don't have anything to add.
Do we have any more questions? Oh, in the back.
I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here, but as design systems people, I feel like it's probably a question that you guys think about a fair amount. All of you guys separately have mentioned consistency very heavily throughout your presentations, and I'm curious why individually for each of you, you think consistency is so important outside of a branding standpoint, outside of logos and typefaces and colors, why you think it's so important to implement consistency as opposed to having a la carte solutions throughout different products, because all of you guys are talking about different products that you're making either for different schools or for different Etsy applications. I feel like consistency isn't a necessity by nature, since there are different products that can live alone as long as they have the same typeface and general color treatment and logos. They can kind of stand alone, but I'm curious what you guys feel is the reason of why it's so important.
I think for, like, my personal opinion of that is the value plays is with the cognitive load. Like I was mentioning, those different colors throughout a entire process, the user is needing to, like, every new view, there's different colors and different text and placements of things, so they have to work to figure it out. Whereas the consistency between those views allows them, and like with the thinking of like colors as primary, secondary, it allows them to just very naturally know, like, I click this to keep going next. It creates continuity between all those flows, and it makes it easier to decipher and to understand. And for me, it is like, yeah, brand is a very important part of that. Or like brand, like the color in that case is like what that color is not necessarily which color performs better, but it's like what represents that brand. And then like the consistency of that color creates that continuity and lowers the cognitive overload between those.
Yeah, I would +1 that, but just like the experience and setting expectations. Consistency is important, that someone should, you know what's going to happen when they're interacting with something. In the wider brand, I think that's something I struggle with, because right now we don't have a lot of consistency with all of our different properties, and what I'm trying to do is answer that question, like at what points do we need it and at what points does it not matter. Personally, I'm a fan of consistency, and working with a creative team who likes freedom and likes not having consistency. So figuring out, maybe there are times where doesn't really, a conference doesn't need to look like GitHub. It can be completely different, and that's okay. But figuring out when we do need to set those expectations and when we don't.
Yeah, I think I'm a X or still an HCI guy at heart. So for me, it's usability. And then after that, a lot of our products, really, even though they're individual products, they lead into each other. So, from just like a trust perspective, I think it's a good idea to have, this step to look like the next step, so you kind of feel like, okay, I'm in the same kind of world.
Hi. Do you guys ever feel like enforcing the design system stifles creativity? I think you talked about it a bit. But how do you, I guess, balance the maybe I should do this new thing with this existing solution versus I need to come up with a new one? I tend to feel like I'm trying to brute force a solution into an existing component or system just to not invent a new one, but maybe there's a creative one around the bend.
If you guys have an answer to that, I'd love to hear it.
I think, for one thing is, for a lot of us, we work on specific teams and specific features and projects. But for a user, they're experiencing the entire thing. So there's a level of danger with that, in that you're creating a new convention for a very specific piece when your user is using everything. So the idea is gotta keep in mind you're designing a part in the whole, and that customers see it and they experience it as a whole. And so yeah, I understand. At the same time, make sure that you're able to go very deep and low level, as well as super high, and see the entire thing. But you can introduce an idea for a new pattern or for improving an existing pattern, and that goes through the same process. But it's also as far as stifling creativity, in some ways, I think that constraints create creativity and allow you to be more creative, and also knowing what you're being creative on. Is it the UI, the way a switch works, or a toggle, or are you being creative in the solution to the problem? So channeling your creativity on specific things and not designing buttons over and over and over and over and over again is I think where design systems really comes in handy, because it allows you to focus your attention on the design solutions as a more so than the means of which the design solution is executed. If that makes sense.
Listen. Ooh. So I know I'm not on the panel, but I kind of wanted to answer your question. I work at the New York Times, which is significantly larger than most of the companies in here, and we have a ton of different brands that are going on. And so I think that when it comes to a design system, to Marco's point, designers, I think what's happening here is that we think of a design system and we're thinking of dogma. And it's not necessarily dogma. It's a set of guidelines that kind of help you as a designer to stop doing the same thing over and over and over again. So a good example is at the Times right now, we're still in the infancy of building out our design system. But we have say the cooking team, and then we have the customer product team, and then we have the well team. And then they'll be oh, well, the login exists, but it doesn't look quite like what we need. So let's just rebuild it. You're literally spending 3 days to rebuild a login screen that already exists. Why? So the question, I think it ties into this bigger play of this design system exists solely so that you're not focusing on the same thing that someone else has already done. You're not repeating work. But then also what's nice about not having to repeat very basic work that should already have been done, the foundation is laid, your creativity is expanded to focus on more important problems than what the color of a button is, because you shouldn't have to do that. So that's it.
Yes. An analogy I've used before is you know, there's I don't know how many people work at Lego, but there's probably thousands, and like they obsess over the very fine details to make sure that every block locks together with every block extremely well, and they design every single block, which allows us or kids to be able to like imagine what we can do with those blocks, and now to think about how do we make better blocks. So like we make really good blocks, and we're good at making blocks to allow everyone else to be able to like imagine what they could do with those blocks.
Hi, I have a question. So I'm really interested in the brand as spectrum that you kind of outlined as a framework for GitHub. And this is a kind of general question. I don't have something specific, but I'm really curious how that came to be and kind of how that collaboration works between brand and product, if it's an organizational thing, if it's a process thing, and maybe it's not, but how does that all coordinate together and kind of come about to influence everything?
So it's still in the very early stages. This is like basically just figuring out a way of defining things so that we can then change things with a reason. But it's been, I think I'm definitely on the side of wanting to systematize everything and document it and have it a certain way. And I've been working closely with someone on our creative team who is pretty much the polar opposite. And figuring out, just having a lot of conversations of like where we can meet in the middle. And this is what we've both come up with, where he feels that he has enough freedom to do his job, and I feel that we also have enough constraints that moving forward we'll be able to start making the things that need to be consistent.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question? So then do you just kind of go and have your individual teams execute separately, or are you collaborating consistently between
We work
the teams?
pretty closely together, yeah. So, for example, like on a conference site, he'll start doing the branding, and then I'll do the website of stuff, and then we kind of collaborate on illustration and everything in between.
Okay, we've got one more question over here. I just wanted to ask about timelines. Like, when do you consider a design system like done? I don't know. And then just how do you find the time to work on it if you maybe don't have a dedicated team for design system building? I'm working with another developer, but I feel like we talk about one thing and then like we regroup in like next week or 2 weeks, and because we just have other projects that we're working on that are actually on the roadmap, you know. So.
Yeah. At GitHub, we have a small dedicated design systems team, which is right now two people with a third out on paternity leave. And then it's kind of run like an open source project. So we have contributors from other teams help out, and that's nice because I think there is an importance for people who are not just focusing on the system, but also have deadlines and are working either on product or on creative or on marketing or web, native, to then come and provide their input. So short answer is 3 people with contributors on top of that. And timeline will never finish.
Yeah, it's never done. Keeps us all having jobs. But so the web toolkit for at Etsy was created in kind of a sneaky way. Like we had a project or a feature, this is listings manager for one of our seller tools, and the team that created that was basically built the system, or the seed of the system through that feature. And so they kind of built like the system and then used that in order to build the feature. And then after that, after it kind of gained some traction, we created a working group. And so anyone could join the working group, and it met weekly or bi-weekly? Bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly.
And and like everyone, this is all like in everyone's free time. Like they just believed in it, they wanted to use it. We created every quarter, we had projects, and it was done like in everyone's spare time. And so about, I think it was just a year ago, or a little over a year ago, when we formed a legit design systems team. And so for the first like 2 years of it, it was just like people contributing spare time.
I like to call it stealth team rather than sneaky team.
Yeah, I think if you talk about a spectrum, I think you probably have the most established and maybe middle. So I am the design systems team to you. And it really is like a labor of love for me. Like I'm maybe, I don't know, not a weird person, but I love CSS and SAS and like doing that kind of stuff. And Matt can tell you that like I'll go home during the weekend and I'll come back and like, hey, I redid everything, sorry. But yeah, for me it's a labor of love, and on our roadmap, for at least for me, is to eventually have a design systems team that can take on this full time, because it was the kind of project or product that nobody thought we needed until it was already done and being used everywhere, and then everybody was like, I don't even know how we did this without this. So it's at night, basically, is the time.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, special thanks to our speakers and for answering all those hard questions. Yep, round of applause would be good. And we won't keep you away from more snacks and drinks for long, but Megara's just going to say a couple of words, and then, yeah, please talk to each other, and feel free to hang around for a bit and eat food.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you for coming out. This is awesome. It's great to have kind of the design community come out and to talk about stuff like design systems, because we're, what? I thought you asked where am I? I'm like, oh yeah. So my name's Megara. I am the design manager for our design systems team. So I'm very excited that we got to host this, and I hope that we can host more events in the future. So if you guys have any ideas of how you want to potentially use this space or have different kind of conversations, please come find me. We also have what we call our design family hour, and sometimes we have guests come in and just kind of talk about their work. So Kate, I don't know if you want to raise your hand. Kate is amazing and she organizes that, so definitely go find her if you're interested in that. And yeah, so please help us drink all the booze and eat all the food. And we just have to be out of here by like 9:30, just to be courteous of everyone else that's here helping us with this event. So thank you. Thank you.
Really cool. Yeah.